Without the ones like you, who work tirelessly to keep things running, everything would suddenly stop. Hospitals, factories, schools, and power plants, they all depend on you. No matter the weather, emergency, or time of day, you're the ones who get it done. At Grainger, we're here for you with professional-grade industrial supplies. Count on real-time product availability and fast delivery. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
The views, opinions, or advice offered by this show's host do not necessarily reflect those of News Talk 780 KOH or its parent company, Cumulus Media. This is Bosma on Business with award-winning entrepreneur Mike Bosma, sponsored by Keystone CPAs. We're getting Northern Nevada back to business.
Good morning, business owners. Mike Bosma, your business-savvy CPA, coming to you from the KOH studio. Hey, you Garden Show listeners, you want to hang tight and hang on for dear life on today's installment of Bosma on Business. You know, each and every Saturday, we really try and give you 60 minutes of some good, action-packed business adventure. Today, we're going to do a little bit deeper dive on that. That's why I want you to lean in to today's installment of Bosma on Business. We're going to talk about the ABCs, 1, 2, 3s of the process and the details, good, the bad, the ugly, of selling your business to be able to, air quotes, retire. So it's just like, you're out there, you Garden Show listeners, you're out there, you're such a hoe. You're hoeing the rows, getting the weeds out. I get it. But maybe you're going to figure out, do I want to do this the rest of my life? So today's installment, we're just going to really kind of help you understand how to monetize that business. What's a sellable business? What's not a sellable business? How businesses are valued? But really, with some of the more robust parts of business, the ins and outs of a business that will create oodles of value for you. To give you some examples of some deals we're working right now in studio. My good friend and partner in business. I'm going to say partner in crime because, he's a financial advisor and he gets all weirded out on that. But definitely, Brian Wheeler, I've known for probably going on 20 years now, Brian, and worked with, a couple years ago, he came on as a principal in Keystone Wealth Advisors, which is an adjunct to Keystone CPA. So Brian, first time in studio.
That's right.
So many times on the radio, first time in studio. Welcome to Bosma on Business.
Well, thank you.
So Brian, I guess, maybe at the top of the hour, we'll shake it up a little bit and talk about, the markets, is, which seems to be, we're in a presidential cycle, which usually the market's kind of all over the board on just the uncertainty of it. That's not anything good for the market, but the market seems to be kind of rolling. What's any high level perspective on the market?
It's been a strange couple of years, and since COVID, I don't think anything's really been status quo. It's been kind of counter-cyclical to what we might sometimes think. Even coming through COVID, we had a huge drop and a bounce back that happened, way quicker than most of us thought. And I think generally what we're hearing is, basic business fundamentals are staying relatively consistent, and though it's not fast growth, the markets have been favorable. One thing I've noticed, though, a little bit is some of our portfolios have been underperforming the indices, largely because it's a few tech companies have been really driving the height of the market.
Okay.
So not all companies are winning in this environment, but there are a few tech stories that are
doing pretty well.
Doing well.
Right. It makes sense, right? So, and I think that's where, one of the things I've come to appreciate about you, Brian, is, you are the, trying to think how not, like Elon Musk has the boring company. And in many ways, you're the boring financial advisor. Now that's not a slight. Actually, when it comes to your wealth, blocking and tackling, center of the center lane, matching the indice that you're matched to, lower fees, why is that good for people?
It's just stability, and some flexibility. I think that there's a lot of people out there who try and pick stocks and try and outperform what the indices are, and most of them are not educated enough, don't have the teams and people beside them to really do that well. So, tracking the indices and just keeping, in line with those over time, slow and steady kind of wins the race.
Well, yeah, and that's where I think, who was it? It was Andrew Fastow, former CFO of Enron. You may remember that name. Now, Andy, I had the good fortune of being able to have a discussion with him a couple of years ago, and I was in an entrepreneurs organization event, and I remember, and I'm a student of Enron, and because the world changed as it came to public accounting in that season. Took out Arthur Anderson, their auditor. Enron went bankrupt. A lot of people lost their jobs. It was really bad. But so as I pressed into that, because you can't trust the news, I realized this is fascinating. So, and when I was talking to Andy, and what he said was that he went to jail for the same thing that he was voted the best CFO in America for the year before. He said there was nothing hidden. There was nothing in the investigation that came out. Everything was vetted by the board of directors, the attorneys, and the auditors. And so it was he's just status quo. And he ended up going to jail for it. I go, Andy, aren't you mad about it? He goes, no, I'm regretful. I'm remorseful. And I'm like, you were like the most, basically they had to refinance this thing, every, 12 to 18 months or they were going to go bankrupt. He said this, I want you to press into this right now, he said, we had become desensitized to risk, that for so long we were betting the farm and we were just like, it's just another deal. No, we've got this. But what I realized is the CPA, that, the public puts a lot of reliance on, a lot of trust in, that I should have been the voice of reason to say, guys, we got to find a better way because we're betting the farm every 12 to 18 months. There's shareholders are going to lose if we can't pull this one off. There's employees, and he said, we became desensitized to risk because it was just used to, living on the verge. And I go, that's how most people are with the stock market, Brian. It's like, they're just like, hey, I'm making 15%, 20% last year. Bet the farm. I've seen it in cryptocurrency, all of it. And that's what I say, the boring portfolio, right? You business owners out there, you know who you are. You should expect a return on capital for you, depending on if it's leveraged or not, at a minimum 25%. But it should equally easy be 50%, 150%. You should be tripling your money every year if you're leveraged. But you can't. It's like heroin. You just can't go to your next fix. And you just have to have boring, stable money so that, because what goes up must come down. You have a blip in your business, you need that pile of cash on the side, whether it's in your retirement account, whether it's in your after, and the thing, the beauty with today's environment, even if it's not in your retirement account, we can park it in places, think Nevada self-settled spendthrift trust, that, once it percolates for 2 years and it's creditor remote, no creditor could get it. So you got to be smart about this stuff. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is just how to be smart as a business owner. Don't bet the farm every time, right? Have your risk capital, which is your business, and then have boring capital, which is Brian's job. It just doesn't resonate with me, Brian. I don't know. How's this feel for you?
Feels fine.
Okay.
I think, business owners have a lot of risk in their businesses all the time, and that's the one that can control a little bit, right?
Right.
So to have other assets building outside the business and just slow and steady and building over time, it's going to work for them.
And all right, and you can match the indices, right? Match the S&P 500, match the NASDAQ, match the Dow Jones. Whatever, depending on your risk. Brian can do that on a sidebar and help you figure out what indice or all of the above, whatever it is. But that way, you're just like, I'm just trying to match it, which just means we want to have an efficient way to so you don't suck all the returns out in fees. And I'll tell you, financial advisors, Brian, now that interest is more than zero. They're very proud of their fees, I've found. It used to be 1%, and the market's gone up. You should make all the money. I've seen 2% management fees. Yeah,
it's all over the board. And, I think the industry has been slowly trying to shift a little bit through RIAs and other firms that are fiduciaries, and you're starting to see some fee restructuring. We've taken the approach where we do financial planning as a separate sidebar. It's its own thing. We don't do it as part of an AUM fee and also offer financial planning. So we were able to drop our fee on the investment side, right? And really make it fair to the clients.
Well, yeah, and I've seen all those financial plans that the non-RIAs do. That's a registered investment advisor. Look it up. That means they're a fiduciary. That means they have to care more about you than themselves. It's a good fiduciary standard. But that's where, they do the financial plan. And Brian, you're agnostic. If they want to, if they're, a lot of our businesses, business owners, they're all, they would say overweighted in their business, right? They have a disproportionate amount of their wealth tied up in their business because they're growing their business. I get it. So, so that's where you got to have, this other part as you're growing it, stable and stable, predictable returns, but it still needs to be in the equity markets or you're going to miss out on a lot of upside. But I guess, saying that, you have an opinion on how these businesses are valued. Now I would say business brokers, self-included, we take a very non-sophisticated approach at doing business value. So, and I say that, we subscribe to a software called BizComps. It's all the SBA transactions. So I can look at BizComps and, go through that and it pulls up all, any $5 million or less transactions over the last 20 years. I've got those, and that's most of the transactions we do. Their enterprise value of $1 million, usually, probably on average $3 million is a good bogey, right? Which is, I have $3 million of revenue. I'm making $1 million. I'm going to sell that business for $3 million, and I don't really need more than that. But your approach to business value, because I'm just like, people come to me, they want to get their stuff listed. I tell them what they'll list for because I don't really have time to fix it. I don't have time to okay, let's hire a management team. All these things. Talk to me about Keystone Wealth Advisors' approach to business value, business valuation.
Well, it's multifaceted, and I think the initial financial assessment is the place that gets us close. But with all business valuations, there's a range of value. Mm-hmm. Am I as good as my peers? Am I best in class? Or am I actually below my peers as far as quality of my company? And when we talk about quality of company, it's really getting into, who are my people? Do I have a management team in place that can run the day-to-day without my consistent involvement? Do I have systems and processes in place, and are they well documented? So if a new owner comes in, they know exactly how to just plug and play and keep that machine running. Do I have a good customer base? Do I have recurring revenue? Do I have a model that really substantiates ongoing profits? And then, what is my reputation in the industry? What is my brand worth? But if we look at all those kind of intangible capitals of a business, we can then, help them find some areas to actually increase the value of their business if we've got some time. We're not on the chopping block, hey, I need to sell tomorrow, to actually raise that multiple and get a better value.
Well, yeah, and that's where, Brian is currently helping me in a couple difficult cases that I have for selling people's business. And probably the most notable is, you go down that list, the quality of the company, quality of the management team, recurring nature of the revenue. And, and I have one listing. So if you want to buy a paving company, I have a good one for you. Actually, because it's a little complicated, those are always the best ones. You just got to be able to be, I guess, savvy enough to press in to what makes it complicated. In this one, the owner, operator, he does, he doesn't have that management team behind him. And so we've had numerous suitors that, and there's a lot of people out there that they don't want to drive a grader every day for work. It's a bigger business than that. They've got 30 employees, they're a good sized business. So they're like, well, I don't want to drive the grader. I just, I want to be able to manage this thing and grow the empire. And so, when the owner retires, there's not that, obvious number two. And so that's the beauty of having Colleen Morrison. She's our chief people officer for Keystone. And I just say, Colleen, I need a general manager. I need a general manager here. And she was able to track one down pretty quick, so that way, if somebody's needing to have that role filled, then, hey, we can do that. If that's anything that's going to bar them purchasing this business. As I mentioned, talking about the ABCs 1, 2, 3s of how businesses are sold and how to make them worth a little bit more. In studio, Brian Wheeler. When we come back, we're going to press into a little bit more about some of those more intangible components to business enterprise value and how you can change your day-to-day to make a buck or two more. It's called Bosma on Business. Newstalk 780 KOH. Welcome back to Bosma on Business. Your host, Mike Bosma. In studio, Brian Wheeler. Principal Keystone Wealth Advisors, and a huge part of Keystone's overall success. Basically Keystone, it's integrated turnkey delivery of services, right? Just we make it easy for business owners. Can't tell you how many times I'm meeting with one of our loyal listeners, and they're like, "Hey, actually this happened on Friday, yesterday." They had somebody come in and they were like, you had this tax problem. They listened to the show and they're like, hey, I need some help. And, and they had it, they got a bill from the IRS for $800,000, Brian. That they didn't make that much. They kind of, their heart goes pitter patter, pitter patter. They're doing their own tax return on TurboTax. I told them, I see what the error they made, and I said, you can hire me to do this, but you really can just call and tell them, looks like when they processed your tax return, these 2 pages stuck. because this is not in your transcript. I said, now I can do that for you, but to get a power of attorney, send it in, wait on the phone for an hour or two to get through to somebody, talk to him, and then let you know what happened. It's going to be a couple grand. Now, granted, you save $800,000 in penalties. This maybe, but I don't think you need to spend the money. My brother, I think you can just call this number right here, tell them exactly what happened. They'll walk you through it. He's like, I can do that? Yeah, that's fine. So we talked a little bit. I said, but they had just retired and they had all their money, in IRAs, and of course the husband, because it's always the husband, seldom the wife that's living on the edge of, I'm a day trader now. I'm living my best life, and I just like, well, you're doing all that in your IRA. That doesn't make sense to me. He goes, well, what do you mean? I go, well, if you're wildly successful at what you're doing, you're going to pay ordinary income on all that. He goes, oh, I didn't thought of that. I go, well, so that's why I brought in you, Brian. I go, hey, we talked about, income tax bracket stuffing, getting to that, the top end of whatever bracket you're going to be in retirement, and then, do enough Roth conversions to get there. And so that ultimately you're liquidating your IRA position in favor of a Roth position. Oftentimes you kind of do that at capital gains rates, because that's most people are 15, 22% in retirement. So I'm like, it's pretty light on how much you lose, because otherwise and I told him, I was like, yeah, your kids, they're, divorced, got adult kids, in their 50s. I go, how much money are they making? Oh, they're all 37% bracket. I go, so, you can pay the tax at 15, 22%. And then as it grows, you'll see that in your model that you do for financial planning, that you're going to make all the money, right? Because now it's going to grow tax free, and it's going to grow. They're relatively young. They probably still had another 20 years in the tank, hopefully, prayerfully, right? So, and if you look at what they'll lose in having paid that out in ordinary, and then, their kids are going to inherit it, and then they're going to pay it out in 10 years, and they're going to pay all at 37%. And they're like, maybe we haven't been so smart about this. And they're like, oh, my, like in that case, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of lost value in that family. And it makes me sad, Brian.
Right.
So I'm glad that you were able to, and that's the beauty of it, right? We're talking, turnkey integrated services where like, hey, can I text you? Can you swing into the conference room? And you did make 5-minute introduction, and they're like, we didn't know this was even a thing, right? And that's where, speaking of business owners who don't understand how businesses are bought and sold, why? Because you've been learning how to run your business all this time, but you haven't, this is a particular nuance. And so, Brian, what I want to do is go through some of these components in your valuation model that, and how that might help a business value. Okay. And so one of the things that you talked about was management team. Talk about what that is, the good, the bad, the ugly.
So, it depends on the business and the industry a little bit, size of the business. There's a lot of factors go into that. But ideally, if you can design a business and have key people in those roles that help the operations of the business go to a point where you could even leave on vacation for 3 months and not worry about anything missing a beat, that's a good place to be from a business owner's perspective and from a valuation perspective.
Right.
A buyer on the outside is going to look for an opportunity to buy a cash cow that's generating money without having day-to-day operations involvement of the owner himself, right, or herself.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it, right? So if you have, and maybe that's the homework for our listeners, Brian, today is start with a week sabbatical where you can't have your phone. Okay, well, you can have it, but don't look at it, right? And that'll tell you how well you're doing, what systems process working on, and then go to 2 weeks, and then go to a month. I know I heard the gasp of my business owners, Brian, as they, that slow inhale, like now their heart's racing, and then go to the 3 months. If you can leave your business for 3 months and it operates business as usual, makes the same amount of money it's always made, brings in the same new clients it's always done, then you've got a business that is going to catch premium value. Now, if you don't have that, you still have a valuable, don't get me wrong. But what Brian said, and it's absolutely true, is there's a range of values. Like when I do that BizComps evaluation, it's all, there's a range. It's like a low range, a high range, and then you have to, and what you're talking about is if you want to be on the higher end of the range, then do this. And it makes economic sense, people, because usually, that person for most businesses that we're going to list, you're going to pay that person from 80 to 120 grand a year, right? And so that's going to drop your enterprise value, somewhere between $250,000, $350,000, but that's just based on numbers. But then you're going to get a higher multiple, right? You're going to have more suitors, right? And so by and large, you should make, let's say it costs you $300,000 in enterprise value because of lower earnings. Fine. all you then do is you say, okay, then set that bogey, and I should be able to negotiate a higher sales price for you because of, this is a turnkey operation that has management. They're trained, right? And we know, and I think the fallacy, Brian, is what people think, is that people are buying a business based on how much money it's made. What's a fallacy in that thinking?
Well, what it's made, I've heard two schools of thought, what it's made, but also what the top line revenue is, which I think is also a really silly approach. But what it's always made changes, and it's a difficult gauge to rely on all the time. Understanding why it's made the money and what's in place to allow it to do that, I think is an important part of the equation we can't forget about. Well,
yeah, and I think that's where this concept is called quality of earnings. You alluded to it on the last segment. The quality of earnings is, what's the likelihood that you're going to be able to replicate prior performance moving forward? Okay, that's it. That's quality of earnings. And so, yeah, if you want, we can do a quality of earnings report for you to say, okay, what, and we do that for the benefit of the buyer. We represent the buyer on that. So we just, we're an advocate there, and we basically try and blow up the business model and see, if 50% of the revenue is coming from somebody that they already own the company, all that kind of stuff, And, but yeah, so we're talking about, going to the higher end of the multiple range. And it's interesting, right? Because a lot of times, I'd probably say more than half of the transactions I've done in the last 3 years, I think I'm on 45 transactions the last 3 years. More than half of them, the buyer wanted the owner to stay around. And now, because we've been doing it long enough, we've seen the second pop on that. So I'll give you an example. One of my first transactions I did in Keystone, which was 2021, sold a business, kind of same deal. Engineering business, $3 million in revenue, made $1 million of income, owner's discretionary earnings. And then we sold it for $3 million. So some would say, oh, it's 100% of revenue. It's just a multiple of earnings. But they had a 20% equity roll. So, instead of, so they sold for $2.4 million and then rolled $600,000 into the new company. And, and they're a private equity firm, very aggressive. They're in the process of selling that company again. Well, the beauty there is, so he sold the first bite of that apple for 2.4. This bite at the apple, they're getting 10x of his initial investment. Yep. So he said that 600 he invested, he's getting 6 million back on. So yeah, and that's where you just, you're doing the due diligence on the buyer at that juncture. So that's, maybe a little life hack for you is, and then you have your management in place, you're still there, and then they have time to hire somebody. So, it could be easier, but then you have to work for somebody. And let's talk about that when we come back. We call it Bosma on Business. News Talk 780 KOH.
Former Navy SEAL Sean Ryan shares real stories from real people from all walks of life on The Sean Ryan Show. Comedian John Christ.
How long have you been in Nashville? Let's see, 2018 is when I moved here. I lived in an apartment. I didn't know anything about it. I lived in L.A.
You were living in L.A.? How was that?
Yeah. Well, let's see, good for my career. Send me to rehab, though, so that's pretty much the sum of it.
The Sean Ryan Show on YouTube or wherever you listen.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woo-hooer, a hand clapper, a high-fiver? I kind of like the high-five, but if you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. At ChumbaCasino.com, choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses, so don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Welcome back to Bosma on Business. Your host, Mike Bosma. In studio, Brian Wheeler, Principal, Keystone Wealth Advisors. Talking about, the nuances of increasing enterprise value and, that's the value you can sell your business for and why it matters so much. And, talk before the break, Brian, about, considering doing an equity roll where you roll over a piece of your equity, try and get some upside on that. It's interesting, anecdotally, at a transaction I represented a year and a half ago now, and, the equity play hasn't worked out so well, right? Because the capital market's been a little tight to raise capital in recently, and their other business lines haven't been performing, and you want to dampen somebody's enthusiasm. Don't hit your projections, right? So all of a sudden people have a different thought process on that. talking about some of the more qualitative parts of growing a business. But one of the things I just want to be able to talk about, you talked about systems and processes. So what is it and how does it drive business value?
So it's really anything related to a repeatable process. I think most businesses operate based on how they've just kind of evolved, but there's not really a process there. And the sooner they can get to a place where they have an actual process that's repeatable, two things happen. I become more efficient in what I'm doing, and new people that come in, the training curve is much lower if I've got a place for them to relate to and see how things are done. Mm-hmm. And, these days, there's some great tech platforms out there that can help you capture things like SOPs, standard operating procedures, and through multimedia type venues to really record all that stuff. So it's an easy handoff.
Right. And what are your thoughts on Trainual?
I think it's a really unique platform. It can capture everything from the flavor of the company, understanding all the different players that are part of that company today, capturing the culture a little bit of the company, but it also is just a great, easy way to capture those processes. As people are going through their daily routines, they can record themselves going through the keystrokes, basically. Right. And that becomes your training manual.
Yeah, think, just a Zoom call with yourself, right? Or somebody else, do it like, hey, I'm just going to share my screen and then hit record. And then they're seeing all the keystrokes. There's, okay, this is how this goes. You see your mouse. It's okay, do this. You're just talking in your microphone, walking people through it. And then you have a standard operating procedure. This is how we do this. So, and I think, for my businesses that I'm selling, I'm a big fan of Trainual. We're doing an implementation at Keystone right now. Although there's some pushback to change, Brian. That's what I found, right? Like
always.
Yeah. So, one more place to look for stuff. Like, no, this is going to be the place for all of it, right? It's like it's one place. It's what it does. Pay the freight, and that's where when we talk about systems and price, probably the most appreciated part of running a business, right? Because, and I'll put it this way, when I bought the Bosma Business Center, I don't know however many years ago now, 2011, so I guess 13 years ago. A couple years in, the fire alarm goes off. Don't think anything of it other than you call the alarm company. Well, first you make sure the building's not on fire, and then you call the alarm company, and you say, hey, I need you to silence the alarm, and they're like, well, what's the code? Code? I don't know. I'm going to have to call the prior owner because I never gave you a code. All we did was change. It was Stanley. Just change. They just said, okay, just now bill this company instead of that company. We never set anything up. They just continue on with the old code. And so it's like all that stuff you never think about. You're not going to remember to tell the purchaser, oh, by the way, the code for the fire alarm is XYZ. And that's what, so it's just a place to have all that. So that way, and I'll tell you, man, it is, like we more than doubled this last year. And it really underscored some of the weaknesses in our training platform. I mean, it was like, because we just don't have enough people to train all the new people. And, or otherwise we're not getting any work done. So we hired a professional trainer, like, okay, and then we're like, and then she's like, well, what's your training protocol? I'm like, well, I don't know. Casey and Cody tell people what to do. I have no freaking idea. So we're doing the same thing. And because that way it's like, okay, we're capturing all that. And then it's like, okay, here, just, go to this module in Trainual and then go through the modules and it's going to, train you. And if you could do that, and it's not perfect, people. It's, gets you about 80%. But if you could take 80% of the lift off of somebody, how much more could you do, right? Okay, and then talk about the value of the customer, Brian. Like, how does the value of your customers, to drive enterprise value?
Well, there's several aspects to that. I think, the number of customers that you have, if your type of business has one or two key customers and they represent 80% of your business, that's not a very strong business model to maintain. You lose one of those customers for anything that goes wrong, and your revenue drops. Mm-hmm. So having a diverse customer base, having a repeatable customer base, creating a subscription model where you can, all those things can contribute to just a more attractive business all the way around.
Right. Yeah, no, it's interesting. So like as part of, I guess, our growth platform, if you will, is just, we're representing, I don't know, a dozen CPA firms helping defend audits. This last week flew to Detroit, Michigan. Never been to Detroit before. Kind of part of an urban revival. Kind of cool story. to defend one of these audits, and then the CPA to prepare that return is very appreciative that, for our subject matter expertise. And so when I'm having these conversations, they're just like, well, they're appreciative, and then they kind of see, oh, well, what's your business model? And you start talking, and so now we're talking to people about, maybe coming under the Keystone Arch. Like, hey, why don't you just bolt on to what we're doing? You do you. It's eat what you kill. You're just not trying to get in your pocket. We just maybe share some overhead, but then you can really tie into some of the other more, financial advisory things we do, the business broker things we do. And rather you can refer it over, and then I'll keep all of the profits, or you can be part of the firm and then you get a percentage of it. It's better for you. But it's interesting. I had one company, such company, but 80% of their revenue was doing outsourced CFO services and family office. Now, I haven't talked to you about that yet, Brian, because I'm like, when I looked at that and such, 20% in tax returns, I'm like, ooh, when the owner retires, I'm concerned that 80% of the revenue is going to evaporate. So, versus, the boring tax returns, I know we can offer all these other services too, and then there's upside. This just seemed like a lot of downside for us. But so, that's why I guess for the benefit of our listeners, when you talk about your customers, right, you don't want, what Brian said, you don't want to over concentrate on, one customer. The rule of thumb is 10%. Don't have any customer and some would say industry, I don't know about that, but definitely any one customer that represent more than 10%. In fact, I would say a lot of pride in going, hey, look, I have these big Fortune 500 clients, and they represent 25% of my revenue. And if I've worked with Fortune 500, they're tough, Brian. They're tough. Right. That's usually you might make a buck or two, but man, it's hard work. And because of that, your business is actually downgraded on the valuation scale rather than upgraded. But if you have this, just case in point, right? I had last year I helped sell a candle company. This is probably the most exciting business I've ever sold. It's a candle company, Bosma. Wow, you're boring. No, it's like they sold for 10x. So they're making $2 million a year. They sold for $20 million. And I'm like, how in the world is a candle? I mean, they must be selling bazillions. They're like normally if you're making $2 million a year, maybe you get to $8 million, maybe. But it's retail, consumer goods. That's a hard business vertical. Subject to competition, right? China will blow you up in a minute. Your stuff can be cloned. But what their magic is as people were, and they sold 100% of their stuff over Amazon. And so, but their genius was, they said, well, once people found the scent that they liked, they knew that they needed a candle every month. And so they just said, hey, well, basically you get a candle free a year if you just do it every month. You can cancel it any time, but you'll get it for less. And people are like, well, I'm going to order it anyway. And so, every month they shipped a certain volume of candles, and that was very attractive to people because they didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to secure sell. They didn't have to do search engine optimization. They didn't have to do Facebook ads or Google ads or any of it. They just happened to, and that was very valuable to people. So that's what it's like, the value of the customer, right? And it's different than you might think, right? So, in fact, I'd say when I was talking to this person that did a lot of outsourced CPA work and family office, and I was talking about our practice, it's always a bit of a, you thump your chest. Well, I have so and so. You would know this person. They're a celebrity. And I'm like, okay, and good on you, brother. Good. I don't know that I have any of those. I don't know that you'd recognize any of my clients. In fact, I'd say, we tend to call out the A clients. He goes, oh, you mean the C clients? I go, no, we tend to call out the A clients. And he's like, that doesn't make any sense. It goes exactly counter to traditional wisdom. And I said, well, the issue is we believe that, our service offering is unique enough that you can't find it, this integrated approach. And so, but once you get to a certain size, that now the big four, the top 10, all the rest of it, they're pining away for your business, and there's just other people that can do that work. It's not, now we're not the only firm that can do it. There's plenty of other people that can do it, and that's okay, right? And it's like, hey, if you value us, we value you, but ultimately a lot of times, as people grow, they're like, oh, I need something, a bigger firm, fine. And then they go, or we tell them, hey, a lot of times when you get that large, you start demanding a lot of things, and now it's not equally mutually beneficial. It's just kind of very one-sided. And like, those aren't good relationships for my team to be in. So we tend to. So I just think, but we don't really have any C clients either. So maybe a couple we're trying to grow to B clients, but we just pride ourselves on having all B clients. And he's like, just kind of took him back, right? Because I'm like, but if I could lose any one of them, it's like, oh, okay, it makes me sad, right? We are passionate about our clients, helping them, but nobody else can do this stuff. So we're like, okay, go for it,
Right.
Yeah, no, that's it. And then lastly, Brian, we're talking about growing enterprise value, the reputation. And now, of course, with social media, Yelp, when I was down in Detroit, I took a picture of the Google or the Yelp reviews for that IRS office, 1.7 stars. So I just you start doing those, go to all these different IRS offices, like 1.7 stars, crushing it. How do people drive reputation real quick?
It's just serving clients, taking care of their needs, being there, always, putting their needs first and going above and beyond. Take the burdens off their shoulders.
Right. Well, and I'll tell you, but the way to get recognized for that is just ask your clients for a review. If you're sending them an email, put on the bottom email, hey, let me know how I'm doing. Put it the Yelp there, the Google review. And when you drive that, when somebody's suitor's looking at you, looking at your online presence is important. And if you can say, oh, wow, you're 5 stars, you're 4.5 stars, or if you have a problem, that you deal with it well. Like, oh, hey, I'm sorry. Right. Hey, I will take care of it. I will refund you, whatever it takes. I'm going to make that magic happen. And that will drive enterprise value. In studio, Brian Wheeler from Keystone Wealth Advisors. When we come back, we're going to give you the big aha, the big takeaway, the number one thing to do to sell your business. It's Bosma on Business, News Talk 780, KOH.
Former Navy SEAL Sean Ryan shares real stories from real people from all walks of life on The Sean Ryan Show. Comedian John Christ.
How long you been in Nashville?
Let's see, 2018 is when I moved here. I lived in an apartment. I didn't know anything about it. I lived in L.A.
You were living in L.A.? How was that?
Yeah. Well, let's see, good for my career. Send me to rehab, though, so that's pretty much the sum of it.
The Sean Ryan Show on YouTube or wherever you listen.
Want to get smarter about investing? Then tune into the Capital Ideas podcast from Capital Group, home of American Funds Distributors, Inc., one of the world's leading asset managers. Learn from portfolio managers with decades of experience by listening to the Capital Ideas podcast today.
Welcome back to Bosma on Business. Your host, Mike Bosma, in studio, Brian Wheeler, Keystone Wealth Advisors. If you need one of those 1-hour consultations, I mentioned before the last one that came in, for 40 minutes, hey, just call the IRS. And they said, well, what do you owe you? And I go, well, my gift to the universe is we don't charge for this. And, doesn't look like you need me, so you're good. And he's just like, they couldn't believe it. People that need us, they need us. If you don't, but sometimes you're in a pickle and you just need this one thing. We're glad to help you. And then, then you can go merrily along your way, get on with your life. But 775-786-4900 and Bosma at keystone.cpa. So Brian, we leave our listeners with the number one thing, the big aha, the big takeaway. So if you can give somebody a nugget of advice about if they want to sell their business, what do they need? What would you tell them?
A plan. So many people, I think, get to that place and finally decide I'm going to hang it up, or they just can't come to terms with hanging it up. But if you start 3 to 5 years before you really think you're going to exit and create a plan, understand what your financials are, personally, how the business will translate into, supporting a lifestyle, the success of that whole process, and preparing for, life after business is so important, so there's no withdrawal effects and regrets.
Well, yeah, and I think, the challenge there is, business owners self-identify as, running around with their hair on fire. So they're like, well, I can't get all the stuff done that I have. How am I going to do all that? And that's where a lot of times just hiring somebody in that's on their plate just makes sense. Right. Pay the freight, my people. There's people out there that do it. We can help you, but if or there's other consultants we use, kind of whatever, but just fix the stuff. If it's broken, and if you don't know how to do it, you would have fixed it if you knew, right? So just, hey, reach out, ask until you get the answer, and then get it fixed. And I guess that's where I would say the number one thing that you need to do before you sell your business is do a financial plan. So you need to know how much you need to retire, to live the lifestyle that you've grown accustomed to. And Brian, as you've done all these financial plans for clients, the one thing, the common thread through that is that people, these business owners, they spend most everything they make. They don't recognize how much they're spending on their lifestyle, especially once they realize how much they're running through the business that they'd like to continue, right? Right. So you're like, well, I only pull this much out of my business. Like, yeah, well, how much are you spending out of the business, right? And when they figure that out, they're like, oh, right, I'm, basically I need to sell this for much more than I was planning, or I need to save much more. before I sell. One or the other. You just, either one. Or cut back your lifestyle in retirement, says nobody. So no, that's it, right? That's the deal. So yeah, as I mentioned, if you need some help, 775-786-4900, and Bosma at keystone.cpa. Next week, we had to push this one out a week, but Jamie Palmer is going to be on next week, president of Power Properties, a property management company up in Calgary, Canada, and one of the most recognized property managers in Canada. So, and they do things a little different up in Canada. So we're just Jamie's going to share his journey, and then and we'll talk about cross-border taxation and cool stuff like that. But you business owners, I'll tell you this: if you need some help, give us a call. Until then, just keep that business engine humming. We call it Bosma on Business. Newstalk 780 KOH.
The Rolling Stone Music Now podcast gets inside the biggest stories with Rolling Stone senior writer Brian Hyatt.
Now here is my conversation with Jacob Knoll. Your story is an amazing one, and obviously you lost your dad when you were only 1 year old.
It was definitely a screwy way to grow up. I think that a lot of people never heard of who I am, and then they see me joining this band, and they must think this kid must have just been handed everything, or nepotism kid. It's a gift that I have an opportunity to sing in such a big band like my father and my uncle's band, Sublime.
Rolling Stone Music Now, wherever you listen.